My daughter convinced me to transfer the house to her, promised to care for me, then banished me. I took ruthless revenge. Can you imagine my own daughter treating me like this? She convinced me to put the house in her name, to let her handle the sale, promising care and a move into her apartment. Instead, I ended up in a nursing home. But she has no idea how I might get my revenge. I came to discuss moving in with my daughter after my illness. My body could no longer manage the house I had lived in for almost my entire life. I trusted her. I believed she would welcome me with care, that my transition would be smooth and peaceful. We often spoke on the phone, and recently she herself suggested, "Dad, sell your house. I'll handle everything so you don't have to worry about a thing. Move in with me, I'll take care of you, and I'll put the money in your account." I smiled, feeling relieved. How many times had I worried that I wouldn't be able to handle the upkeep, the garden, the repairs? My daughter seemed sincere. All that time, I imagined myself sitting in her cozy apartment with a cup of tea, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, while she would come home from work, cook dinner, discuss the news, and caringly ask how I was feeling. When I entered the house, I was met by a strange chill. My eyes immediately noticed that something had changed. Items that had always felt like part of my personal world had been moved to storage. I blinked, trying not to make too much of it. She probably just wants to tidy up before I move in, I thought, trying to reassure myself. A thought flashed through my mind, maybe this is all for my own good. I walked down the hallway, listening to my daughter's quiet footsteps. She met me at the door, and there was no smile on her face. I frowned but thought, maybe she's just not in the mood. Maybe she's tired. Her words came out dryly, "Dad, come in." And she led me into the living room. There was a light-colored sofa where I would have liked to settle in, but the atmosphere felt different. A certain tension hung in the air. I sat down, trying to be pleasant. "How are you feeling?" my daughter asked, forcing a smile. I nodded, but a slight anxiety lingered. Everything seemed almost normal, and yet something bothered me. A father's instinct, honed over a lifetime, whispered, "Look closer." She sat opposite me and began talking about the house. "We've already found buyers. The money will be in your account soon." Her voice was soft, persuasive, almost affectionate. I smiled and nodded. For a moment it seemed like the perfect solution. Everything seemed logical and safe. "All right, sweetheart," I said, feeling a lightness as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I studied her face, trying to detect a shadow of doubt, but saw only focus and businesslike efficiency. This must just be her way of showing she cares, I thought, not suspecting how important every coming day, every word, every glance would be. That evening I looked around my house one more time. On the shelves were my books, which I had read for decades. On the walls hung photographs of my wife and daughter, memories of years of happiness and care. Everything felt familiar, but an unusual sense of unease wouldn't leave me. I walked through the house, touching the furniture as if verifying that it was still mine, even though it had already been decided that soon a part of this world of mine would pass into strangers' hands. "Dad, I'll start on the paperwork tomorrow," my daughter said. I nodded, smiling. "All right, sweetheart." "Thank you," I replied. Soon everything would be simpler. Less worry, more peace, my daughter's care nearby. But deep down I understood that today was only the beginning of something big. Something I couldn't yet fully grasp. The next day, I woke up with a slight feeling of anxiety but tried to convince myself that everything was going according to plan. My daughter had promised to help with the sale of the house, and I thought this decision would truly make my life easier. I arrived at the house a little earlier to check on the progress. And then the buyer appeared, a young man with a backpack, carefully inspecting the rooms as if I didn't even live there. My daughter walked behind him, pointing at the walls, shelves, furniture, commenting on every detail. "The kitchen will be here, you could make an office here." Their voices were calm, businesslike, and in that moment, I felt a strange sense of alienation for the first time. They were talking about everything, but it was as if I weren't there. I stood in the hallway trying to say something, to comment, but my daughter just nodded and continued the tour, paying no attention to me. I felt a slight inner tremor. This is my house, and it's as if I'm not here. I tried to interject jokingly, "Should I show you the basement?" But they just smiled and continued the walkthrough without stopping. The buyer was jotting down notes in a notebook, my daughter was adding her comments, and I stood there watching as my space, filled with years of memories, turned into a transaction. The contrast between my feelings and their matter-of-factness was almost physically palpable. The deal was finalized faster than I had expected. My daughter announced with a smile, "Dad, you'll need to move out within a week." I nodded, trying to contain my excitement, and asked, "And when will the money be transferred to my account?" She just nodded and said everything would be ready by the next day, then suddenly left, leaving me in the room with the buyer who was already packing up his papers. The next day the movers arrived. I had hoped to go with them at least to supervise the process. But the movers looked at me sternly. "You're not coming with us, sir." They began carrying out boxes, furniture, belongings. I watched as every item that had been a part of my life disappeared from the house. And then my gaze stopped on the address a mover was writing on a box. It was a strange, unfamiliar address, definitely not my daughter's apartment. I was confused but thought that perhaps the belongings were being taken to a storage unit first, since my daughter's apartment was small, which made sense. I tried calling my daughter. Once, twice, then dozens of times. No one answered. At first I thought she was busy, but hours passed and the calls went unanswered. I stood in the middle of the empty house, hearing only the rustling of boxes and the movers' quiet commands. Gradually, the feeling of strange tension intensified. The house, which had once been cozy and warm, was now filling with a kind of emptiness, sinister and oppressive. The walls that had witnessed my life now seemed foreign, and every sound echoed in the void. When the movers finished, the doors slammed shut behind them, and I was left alone in the emptied house. I looked around. The shelves were bare, the sofas were gone, the photographs had been taken off the walls. In that moment, I felt for the first time that my space had completely vanished, that my life in this house was over. I stood in the center of the room like a small child who had lost everything familiar. The phone was in my hand again, but my daughter continued to ignore the calls. I sat on the sofa, looked at the bare walls, and couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. Everything I had known and loved was gone. And all that remained were the calls no one answered and the feeling that I was no longer the master of my own life. The next day I tried calling my daughter again. 50 calls, 60. 100. Each time, silence. I began to panic. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweating. Why isn't she answering? I repeated to myself over and over, feeling the anxiety turn into an almost physical pain. The house, which had only felt foreign yesterday, now seemed empty and dead, as if my life had never been there. I didn't know where to go or what to do. And then a strange car with the words, "Elderly Support Services," parked behind my house. 2 men in uniforms and a nurse got out. "Hello, mister. We're here to take you to the nursing home," the nurse said calmly. I felt the blood rush to my face. "What? This is a mistake. I'm not going anywhere. You can't take me. This is my house," I shouted, trying to hold my ground by gripping the stair railing. But they didn't listen. When I started to struggle and tried to break free, one of the men gently but firmly grabbed me by the shoulders, and the nurse said quietly, "Don't worry, guys. His daughter warned us he's developed dementia. It's all right. We're taking care of him." The nurse's words felt like a knife to the heart. I screamed, resisted, fought back, but nothing helped. My body was aging. It could no longer fight the strength of 2 men, and soon I found myself in the car, faintly hearing my daughter's voice in my imagination, "I'll take care of you." When I woke up the next day, I was in an unfamiliar room with thin white sheets and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Everything seemed bleak. I tried to remember how I got there and gradually realized the terrible truth. My daughter had deceived me. She had sold the house, placed me in a nursing home under the pretext of dementia, and now I couldn't leave. The money from the sale of the house, which should have gone into my account, had gone to her. I sat on the bed, holding my head in my hands, my heart constricting with horror and bitterness. One question kept spinning in my mind: how could she do this? How? I tried to come up with a plan for revenge, but my mind seemed empty. I felt completely powerless, trapped like a child abandoned in an empty room. Every hour spent in that nursing home was torture. But then there was a knock at the door. I lifted my head and saw a familiar face, my old friend, a lawyer, a man I had trusted all my life. He had learned about the situation from the neighbors and rushed to help. "You're not alone," he said, sitting down across from me. "Tell me what happened." I told him everything: how my daughter had sold the house, put me in a nursing home, lied about my dementia, and ignored my calls. My friend listened silently, then frowned. "Listen, we can use this. The gifting of the house to your daughter, it's not just a formality. We'll check the statute of limitations, the documents, and if she broke the law, we can get the money back. We can also challenge your placement in the nursing home because it was done illegally." My friend's words were like a light in a dark room. For the first time in days I felt a sense of hope. A plan for revenge hadn't yet formed, but now I understood. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. I can reclaim my property, get my money back, and, most importantly, regain control over my own life. Sitting on the bed, I felt a resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. Yes, my daughter had betrayed me, but she had overlooked one thing. I know the law, I have allies, and I am ready to act. And even though I am in complete despair right now, a small but sturdy spark of revenge was already igniting inside me. One that would, in time, grow into full retribution.